It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly.
10 years ago today was the greatest miracle of my life. On November 11th, 2012, I was accepted into a youth transitional housing program at 17 years old. Getting into that program began the most remarkable, profound, transformative journey of my life, that eventually this would lead me to become a youth counselor. Because everyone starts the game of life as a kid. Youth empowerment is everyone's empowerment. And if you miss the boat in childhood, it's not too late to start now.
In childhood, I was hyper-sheltered to the point I only knew two places: school and my parents' house, with occasional glimpses of the outside world. This is childhood sheltering, which has become far more common since the 1980s in developed countries like America. Dr. Peter Gray describes this trend as a new parenting style he calls directive protective parenting. Directive protective parents direct their children's activities and limit their freedom, not to force them to labor in fields or factories or to make them servile, as directive domineering parents did. Rather, they do so because they fear for their children's safety and for their futures, and they believe they can make better decisions for their children than their children can themselves. While trustful parents view children as resilient and competent, directive protective parents view children as fragile and incompetent. While trustful parents believe that children develop best when allowed to play and explore on their own, directive protective parents believe that children best develop when they follow a path that has been carefully laid out for them by adults. When I first moved into Booth Brown House, I had pretty severe health issues that had accumulated. So by the time I arrived at the program, my issues included chronic fatigue, PTSD, chronic severe pain, physical weakness, and low testosterone. It took me a long time just to get to the program, and I went from being the boy in the bubble to then being thrown into the world with all of its wilderness and its brutality and its complexity, where I gained my full autonomy overnight. Booth Brown was a refuge and soon became a community. The whole world opened up to me, and suddenly I could explore anywhere, make my own choices, and get the medical treatment and physical therapy I needed. Very quickly, I became pretty good friends with most of my neighbors. After I dropped out of high school, I read and learned so much. Through my healing, through refuge, I discovered and developed my philosophy and values. I discovered the truth that many kids experienced childhood sheltering and trauma and dysfunctional families. Most importantly, that this isn't a life sentence. The beauty of being liberated is a feeling that can never be replaced with anything else. I would walk outside and hop on a bus and look at every new place passing by me. I had discovered the magic and wonder of this world, hiding in plain sight.
Well, summer of 2012, that was like the hardest summer of my life. I was like almost homeless and hated living at my parents' house. It was just chaotic and abusive. I found this place and I actually was able to move here in November of 2012. I really like that most of the staff here they respect our autonomy, and that's like freedom and responsibility together. If you want to be free, you got to be responsible. I'll hang out with friends. We'll go to the grocery store together. Go do, easy stuff because we don't got a lot of money. Maybe we'll find some coupons, go to Wingstop, get some wings, or we'll just hang out here and we'll make jokes and we'll make plans for our big futures that we want to have.
Right. That's perfect.
We're kind of like the Island of Misfit Toys from that claymation Rudolph movie.
Who are you?
I'm the official sentry of the Island of Misfit Toys.
A jack-in-the-box or a sentry?
Yes, my name is...
Don't tell me. Jack.
No, Charlie. That's why I'm a misfit toy. My name is all wrong.
We all got our quirky, not quite fitting in society story, all really different, wide variety of personalities and all that. But we all kind of got our community here and we get along, and I love my community here.
I've realized time and again that the community at Booth Brown was unusually special. We were discovering our own self-determination.
Our three basic needs are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Relatedness is feeling cared for and connected to others. It has to do with a sense of belonging, a feeling that you matter. Competence is essential to wellness, to feel effective in your environment, to have some sense of mastery of the things that are important to you. Very, very important, and environments can have a big impact on that experience. Autonomy refers to behavior that is self-endorsed, that you agree with and find congruent within yourself. And so autonomy here means that you feel choiceful, self-initiating, and when you're fully autonomous, you're wholeheartedly behind the thing that you're doing.
And this was a shared experience. We had to develop our competence and wisdom to maintain the community and keep moving forward. I also view it as a third space. Third spaces are neutral and leveling, accessible to all participants with a low profile. Not flashy, competitive, or career-focused, third spaces orient towards friendship, acceptance, and connection. Third spaces host a number of regulars that bring the place to life with conversation and a playful mood. This energy is contagious and creates the magic of the space, making it a refuge, a home for all visitors. It took me a whole year at Booth Brown House to get my first low-end, hard labor shit job. And once I got to these jobs, I realized very quickly I had no idea how I was going to survive them, because the labor is really intense and I just did not have the strength or ability to do that. But there was a deep, raw, tidal force energy in me that desired saving my life and my own liberation, and that raw force would pull me up again and somehow get me to keep going.
There is something I've discovered called the good struggle. It is a struggle that is worth doing, a struggle that is worth surrendering to and experiencing. And in that surrender, that is what transforms you and refines you. And you become focused and clear and even at peace.
And this is the time where I discovered the world of youth empowerment really for the first time. To this day, these are the innovative people and the books that laid the foundation for my philosophy and my worldview.
First of all, what I'm saying in the myth of male power is that we have to redefine power as the ability to control your own life. And I'm challenging men to say, men, if you are told that in order to get women's love, and the respect of your parents and other men, you have to go out and earn more money than women because you feel like women will only marry you that they won't marry you, for example, if you're reading I'm okay, you're okay on the unemployment line. If we're married to a successful woman and we are a successful man, we often find the woman saying, well, now that children are here, I have three options. Option one is to be full-time involved with the children. Option two is to be full-time involved with my work. Option three is to do some combination of both. And we men say to ourselves, well, you know, I have three options too. Option one is work full-time. Option two is work full-time. Option three is work full-time. So what I'm saying, Deb, is that power is the ability to have control over your own life.
When kids do something inappropriate, most of us feel a need to take some action rather than doing nothing. Therefore, if our repertoire is limited to punishment, that's what we end up doing by default. The first thing to understand is that rewards are remarkably ineffective at improving the quality of people's work or learning. A considerable number of studies have found that children and adults alike are less successful at many tasks when they're offered a reward for doing them, or for doing them well.
Why did this happen?
Well, one reason is because if the kid figures if they have to bribe me to do this, it must be something I wouldn't want to do. So the very act of offering a reward for a behavior signals to somebody, this is not something interesting. The second reason I think this happens is because rewards are ways of controlling kids and adults. So we don't like to be controlled, and we feel that our behavior is being pulled by the reward. We're not in the driver's seat. And so we tend to lose interest in the whole enterprise because we would rather be the origins of our behavior rather than be manipulated by goodies.
So what should we be saying?
Well, rewards, like punishments, are ways of doing things to people. I think the alternative is to be working with people.
I want to understand them. I want to hack into these things that I know are important and lay the code out for everyone to see. So where I started was with connection, because by the time you're a social worker for 10 years, what you realize is that connection is why we're here. It's what gives purpose and meaning to our lives. This is what it's all about. It doesn't matter whether you talk to people who work in social justice and mental health and abuse and neglect. What we know is that connection, the ability to feel connected, is neurobiologically, that's how we're wired. It's why we're here. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to start with connection.
Free play is the means by which children learn to make friends, overcome their fears, solve their own problems, and generally take control of their own lives. It is also the primary means by which children practice and acquire the physical and intellectual skills that are essential for success in the culture in which they are growing. Nothing that we do, no amount of toys we buy or quality time or special training we give our children can compensate for the freedom we take away. The things that children learn through their own initiatives in free play cannot be taught in other ways.
I tried to hear, what is the guy feeling? And I said, sir, are you furious? And then I tried to hear his needs. Are you needing a different kind of support from my country than you're getting? And he looks at me in a kind of a stunned way. Apparently that's not the way people respond to him usually when he screams at them. He said, you're damn right. We don't have sewage. We don't have housing. Why are you sending these weapons? So I said, well, then that makes it clear why you'd be so aggravated. If you don't have these basics and you get these weapons sent over here, I can see that your needs are for some other kind of support. He said, do you know what it's like to live under these conditions for all these years? I said, so you'd like me to understand just how desperate it can be even for one day, let alone for many years. So I heard what was alive in the guy.
After I left Booth Brown House, I had finished a project that I had been working on for a few months. In fall of 2015, I released Will Powerful: Independence in Adolescence. This is my youth independence guidebook. I had consolidated so much of my research and my reading, my experiences, and my growing youth mentorship, and I put that all together in one guidebook that you can read in probably less than an hour. If you are a teenager dreaming of independence and the freedom to lead your life, this simple guide may be of help. This is as much a practical guide as it is a celebration of the human will for autonomy. Even though you are young, you have all your human rights. You deserve freedom, and with unrelenting willpower, you have the chance at empowerment. You could be a pioneer in adolescent autonomy if you step up to the challenge. This is an official statement that I, Jack Walquist, am turning in my 30-day notice on the date of Wednesday, July 8th, 2015. My last month will be the full calendar month of August, and I will be moving out September 1st, 2015. I extend a genuine thank you to the staff and residents of Booth Brown House for the most impacting and beautiful times of my life. Signed, Jack. At the end of 2018, I had some serious health issues that were dangerous, and it almost left me hospitalized. So when I bounced back from that, I really dedicated to taking this work to the next level, where I could actually make a deeper impact on more people's lives in youth empowerment. I even put myself through job counseling with an incredible program called Twin Cities Rise. I felt that familiar feeling that I had back from the days of Booth Brown, that I was around people that had caught a glimpse of self-determination, of their own healing and empowerment, that even as hard and as painful as it might seem, nearly impossible, it is still something worth pursuing. By summer of 2019, 3 opportunities fell into my lap. I first got a job as a youth outreach worker with the StreetWorks collaboration. This was really special, not only because this was a kind of inner circle in the world of youth work, but also because this network contained Booth Brown House. So many of the programs and old mentors and friends that I knew from back in the day, I was now reconnecting with. I also got a job at Kimball Court, an adult housing program for adults that had experienced homelessness, where I was a resident assistant. And lastly, thanks to an old mentor, I was accepted to the 2019 North Star Youth Worker Fellowship. And so I dove right in to beginning the good work.
StreetWorks is a collaborative of agencies, and we work with youth that are ages 12 to 21, and we work with kids that are at risk of being homeless. We work with kids that are homeless because they've been abused or neglected in their homes, and we also work with those kids that have turned to the streets in order to survive.
Have you ever heard of StreetWorks? We help youth 12 to 21 who are getting thrown out of their house, who need to go to the doctor and can't afford it, or just with general services for youth who may not have them anywhere else.
We also carry these bags that have resources in it with like snacks, candy, condoms. Some of us carry underwear and socks.
And it's free. I mean, it doesn't cost anything. Everybody's welcome. Doesn't matter what your deal is.
Young people, when they run to the streets, are running for a reason. It isn't just because their mother won't let them paint their room black. Kids run because of family breakdown, because of family violence, because of sexual abuse in the home, because of severe neglect. When you don't fit in, or when you've been rejected by those same people who are supposed to support and love youth and help them to grow and be safe, then you go to the streets and you find belonging there.
We want to meet youth where they're at and get them to the next stage in their life, whatever that looks like for them.
We listen to what that youth needs, we listen to what their barriers are, and we really ask the youth where they want to start.
Our hopes for all of the youth that we serve is that they will be able to get some sort of sense of stability in their life.
Everybody needs a safe space where they can be themselves, a place where adults can connect with them and build relationships.
We want to be that place for youth to come in and feel safe and then build community around them.
Good morning, I'm Emily Reese, and every Monday on Jazz 88, we speak with an expert from Lutheran Social Service. Today, we're speaking with Natasha Oreskovich. She's the Senior Program Manager of the StreetWorks Collaborative. Good morning, Natasha.
Good morning.
So tell us what your role is at StreetWorks and how the organization serves youth.
So StreetWorks is a collaboration between 16 youth-serving organizations in the Twin Cities who provide coordinated outreach in the 7-county metro area. Outreach workers do street-based and site-based outreach to connect youth with shelter, housing, mental health services, community resources. Youth homelessness looks a little different than adult homelessness. A lot more young people will describe themselves as what they call couch hopping. So it would be staying with friends or family or in temporary places where they can stay for maybe a couple days, maybe a week. It's not as common to see young people sleeping outside.
Intertwine, what's up? It's Mike. I'm here with Elena and Jack.
Hey.
And we're inviting you to December 15th. 25 Days of Giving, we're calling it But It's Cold Outside, a morning with StreetWorks. And Elena and Jack are outreach workers with StreetWorks. Can you guys tell us a little bit, Jack, maybe tell us a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, we help young people ages 24 and under who are experiencing housing instability and any housing related or empowerment related issues. We really focus on empowerment.
Cool, very cool. I would love to hear, Elena, a little bit about why you do what you do.
I've been on and off the streets for 20 years, and even before I was officially an outreach worker, I was doing this work as far as, if somebody needs clean socks or anything I have, just sharing. It's dangerous, and the weather makes it even more so, and so I'm just giving back because there's people that helped me.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of powerful stories and a lot of calls to action, but simple ones, because this isn't about saving the entire world as one person. This is about community.
But there was a dark shadow underside to StreetWorks. And this goes way beyond any specific organization, way beyond StreetWorks. It's in the culture of the Twin Cities itself. There is an aggressive, repressive ideology that's been developing in the Twin Cities for a long time that's only become more extreme and more dogmatic. Most people would refer to this ideology as social justice. You also may have heard it called critical social justice.
Because according to the ideology, there are two categories of people, the oppressor and the oppressed, with all the dimensions with which you could form discrete categories of people, race, gender, sexuality, so on and so forth. And within the category of the oppressed, there's rankings of the groups by how oppressed they are. And according to the dictates of this belief system, you can say whatever you want about the oppressor group, but you cannot say anything critical about groups that are higher up in the ladder of oppression, while you can say critical things about the groups lower in the ladder. And so what this ideology does is it accords groups highest up in the oppression ladder the power to dominate social and political discussions as it pertains to these group categories. That is the whole thing behind what so many people believe nowadays, that you cannot be racist to white people because they're in the oppressor group, and that black people cannot be racist because they don't have the power to be racist, because they're the highest up in the ladder of the oppressed category.
But it's something that is made. It's constructed by humans with the way they talk about things. And at the moment, white, straight, Western men are considered to be the powerful groups in society who have constructed knowledge artificially with language.
Lutheran Social Service of Minnesota is committed to racial equity. We recognize that race does matter and that living in a racialized society has implications on multiple levels: individual, cultural, institutional, and societal. The purpose of LSS Racial Equity Stand is to eliminate racial disparities through education about race, socialization, and racism, and through the implementation of policies, systems, and practices that address racial disparities.
I'm Andre Cohen.
I'm James Scott. Today we're going to be talking about intersectionality.
Intersectionality is one of those terms that may be new to a number of people. And basically, it talks about all the things that we are that make up our identity, that oftentimes either give us privilege or limits our access to privilege and power. For example, I'm 6'2", I'm cisgendered, I am Christian, I am mildly attractive.
And I am I'm a white male. I am heterosexual, cisgendered, raised Christian, bachelor's degree, middle-class income, usually one of the most privileged people in the room.
White men were treated as oppressors and pretty much disparaged and degraded as a group, generically, almost daily. White men were the butt of the joke. And you are expected to defer to people who are in victimhood groups, those who are considered the oppressed. That includes BIPOC, which stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color, and LGBT, and women.
Yeah, so intersectionality really comes out of the work of Professor Kimberly Crenshaw, and it's more than just race.
Because she was studying critical race theory.
She was studying critical race theory, which is that race plus the law plus structures limits people's access to goods, jobs, services, and money, i.e. power. Right?
But intersectionality is more than just race.
But it's way more than just race. It is our gender identity, it is our religious affiliation, it's our culture, it's how I perceive myself and then how other people perceive me, because sometimes we know that that's not always congruent.
And so with that piece, a lot of the causes of intergenerational homelessness include lack of affordable housing, institutional racism, historically white supremacist policies such as redlining. A minimum wage that hasn't increased at the same rate as the cost of living. So there's societal issues that are leading to people experiencing homelessness.
At the same time, I found out that Kimball Court, the adult housing program, was not what it had seemed at face value. The environment there was shockingly depressing and deeply neglected. As it turns out, Kimball Court was not a transitional living program like Booth Brown House or other empowerment programs. Kimball Court was a permanent supportive housing program. And this was a kind of program that had become much more common in a movement that swept across the country in the 2010s. So then by 2019, this had become the norm. This movement is called Housing First.
It's time to set the record straight about Housing First. Across the country, a Housing First approach has enabled tens of thousands of people to get off the street, into homes, and back on their feet.
So what is Housing First? Housing First just says that people who become homeless need to get back into a home as quickly as possible.
Without a lot of preconditions, because services like drug treatment, healthcare, and job training all work better if a person has a stable place to call home.
That's right. Housing First can and usually does include services, but people aren't forced to participate in them, and they won't be forced back into homelessness if they aren't ready for them.
The idea was we can get them off the streets if we put them in housing where there's no conditions, where they don't have to really follow any rules, sobriety rules, engaging in counseling, rules like that. In 2008, the federal government adopted that approach, and let me step back and say that group of people constitutes somewhere between 10 and 20% of the entire homeless population. So, and I'll get back to that in a second. So in 2008, the federal government adopted housing first for the chronically homeless population. So again, the idea being get them into housing as quickly as possible. They may not go into that housing if you require anything of them, if you have rules.
Right.
And again, for that population, probably made some sense, at least back then. In 2013, however, the federal government took this policy, again, approach that was designed for a very small segment and rolled it out as a one-size-fits-all solution. So now we're giving the entire homeless population lifelong subsidized housing with no rules, no requirements, no conditions, and it has epically failed.
This is a public report that I presented originally on February 24th, 2020 to the Minnesota Olmsted Subcabinet, a special committee for the state of Minnesota through the government for anybody to report abuse, neglect, safety hazards against vulnerable adults. So I worked in this housing program. At the main location was Kimball Court. It's run by one of the largest homeless and housing nonprofits in the state of Minnesota called Common Bond Housing. But the main location where I worked was Kimball Court, and that's a permanent supportive housing program for adults. And I also worked at another location a handful of times called American House. Both of these are in St. Paul. And the abuses, the corruption, the neglect, the total remarkable in-your-face apathy that I saw there from the staff and the despondence and misery I saw in the residents was shocking.
I think it's one of the basic bricks of a family, of a decent living, of dignity, to have your own place, to lay your head down. The genius of Common Bond is that they carved out the words "with services" as part of their mission. Affordable housing with services on site. It's genius, it's generous, it's wonderful.
All right, quick list of issues. Dozens of trespassers 24/7 blocking squatting in bathrooms, such severe lack of community that residents can't discern trespassers, hazards like needles, blood spatter from heroin, sewage, water, poop, mold, and more. Flooding kitchen sinks and bathrooms usually due to maintenance issues being neglected, general maintenance issues neglected for 3 to 8 months, such as broken stoves, extreme heat loss, unsecured mailboxes, exit entry doors and fob systems neglected until they break and people are almost stuck inside, outside, or anyone can get in. Individuals constantly drunk or high and in conflict with others or attacked or mugged, frequent stealing of anything movable, police show up every other day on average, often doing nothing, frequent lease violations and eviction notices with intent to criminalize residents or alter facts, domestic violence issues and vulnerable adult abuse, personal, medical, and mental health issues fester for weeks with nobody checking in or helping, frequent threats of fights or violence by guests, trespassers, or residents towards others. No program structure to provide support for vulnerable dependent individuals or focus on empowerment.
People in Housing First can choose to receive treatment at any time, before they enter housing or after they get a home.
What's important is that if they relapse or can't get treatment, they will still have housing.
Housing First is person first. Everyone in Housing First doesn't get the same thing, because no one has the same needs as the next person, except for the one obvious need, housing.
The motto of Kimball Court could be accept, neglect, evict, based on the problems and real impacts of the system here. First, the applicants with the highest level or most challenging needs and who are least likely to make positive improvements are accepted to the program. Then, they are neglected and left on their own. There is no actual program, no weekly activities, no van to take residents to events, no support groups or future planning, nothing. Most people accepted to the program are exiting crisis, but through neglect, prolonged crisis makes every day a disaster until it turns into a lifestyle.
When people entered the homeless system, there was a plethora there was a variety of options for them. They could go into the shelter system, they could go into transitional housing. There was some permanent housing available. But with emergency shelters and with transitional, people enter in and then they exit the system. Today, however, we're giving everyone lifelong subsidized housing. There's no one exiting the system.
This is the spectrum of self-determination. The vertical axis shows how much the individual is self-determined, and the horizontal dotted line is the threshold of independence the individual must cross to maintain and develop their own empowerment. There are natural forces that push up or down on each person. Once a person passes above the threshold, they tend to keep going up. As people move towards the ends, their position stabilizes as their natural forces push more intensively in one direction. Moving closer to the threshold is more sensitive, fragile, and flexible. In the zone of transformation, people have the most potential. Their upward and downward forces are close to equal, and one force can take over, changing their direction entirely. Empowerment programs are often placed far below the zone, leaving many people to fall further down before they qualify. People further below the threshold are more challenging to support and resource consuming. It can take exponentially more advanced programs to push upward intensively enough for the individual to reach the zone. People close to the bottom have likely been affected by long-term damage, making them the most difficult people to help. People here are more likely to damage the quality and foundation of the programs they are accepted to. So when I first moved into Booth Brown House, I got housing. I moved in, I got established, I gained a refuge, and I was able to start making friends and form a little community where then I could pursue jobs and get the health care I needed. I actually did get housing first. Kimball Court, by comparison, and a lot of housing first programs, as they're actually implemented, will get people into the program, and at that point, they're left on their own. The requirements for Kimball Court were focused on the people that were supposedly the hardest to help, those who had the highest needs, who had been long-term, chronically homeless on the street. This is the equivalent of setting a safety net at the bottom of a cliff. By the time this person falls that far, they're broken. And they may be falling so fast or have so many problems that by the time they get to the program, they actually damage it. They break the safety net, and we have nothing left. Programs have their own magnetic forces pulling in participants. Programs at the bottom will drag people down, punishing empowerment and encouraging dependence. Programs close to and within the zone of transformation foster empowerment and set minimum boundaries to protect everyone's upward mobility and self-determination. Opportunities higher up present as scholarships, jobs, and leadership positions. These programs are often out of reach for people just starting on their journey, but support others further along. Some of these positions are jobs in empowerment programs, mentoring participants at lower stages. It comes full circle. People at all levels need opportunities to pursue their own empowerment and support others. So Kimball Court set the safety net near the bottom of the cliff. They focused on high-risk, high-needs clients, and they promoted permanent dependence. They also promoted addiction and violence and lifelong poverty. you could see this impacting the neighborhood around them in St. Paul, where the program is. By contrast, Booth Brown House set the safety net near the top of the cliff. I got into Booth Brown House before I became homeless. And so Booth Brown House, in my time, set the safety net near the top of the cliff and focused on high potential clients that were ready for the responsibility and the transition to empowerment. They focused on a transition to an independence, which meant they also promoted healing trauma, general improvement in health and well-being, and economic empowerment. Every program chooses their foundational values, no matter where their applicants are on the map. Programs at any level can aim to foster dependence or self-determination. Programs, groups, and community members cultivate a larger, shared foundation together. This greater foundation carries the weight of all up and down forces. Increased dependence programs produce more dependence, pulling the entire community down. Effective programs develop their foundation and improve their own self-determination over time. Successful graduates of these programs benefit and give to their communities. The community itself can change direction. If enough programs foster empowerment, the shared foundation will improve and the entire community gains upward mobility. High-level individuals, groups, and communities build deeper wealth based on self-determination, creating resources and strategies to empower people more difficult to help. Over time, communities produce people more capable of helping those further and further below the zone. Youth services are early intervention and they are preventative. And so as these programs and services get damaged, we lose more and more of those early intervention and preventative safety nets near the top of the cliff. With Housing First on the adult services side, this has replaced the diversity of programs with more and more of one type of program that's meant to help people in very extreme circumstances. And this means that on the adult services side, a lot of their intermediate and early intervention safety nets are going away and being replaced with programs that only set the safety net near the bottom of the cliff. So what I've noticed is that these nonprofit, bureaucratic, governmental industries, like my field of work, has gradually grown in size and complexity and is filling the void for the loss of the human tribe. And so with that bureaucratic part of it, it's hyper-politicized. Over time, it develops an academic, bureaucratic, corporate culture. And these ideologies, like Housing First and social justice, develop on top of that.
A huge percent of the workforce, I thought, 20, 30%, were sitting there every day thinking, I'm not actually doing anything. I hope nobody figures it out. I mean, what does that do to the collective soul? I mean, how could you have dignity in labor if you purchase? Like, how is it? Especially, you can see how in the Soviet system they're making up jobs to keep everybody working or looking like they're working because they have a full employment ideology. Capitalism is supposed to be the opposite. A private firm should not be hiring people who don't do anything, but it's happening all over the place. During Occupy Wall Street, we had this webpage called the We Are the 99%, where people could talk about their life situation and why they supported the occupations. 80% of them were women, and even the men were almost always in caring professions. They were teachers, or they were, just doing social work of some kind, or they were in medicine. But they all had the same complaint. I want to do a job where I care for other people and benefit them in some way. But if you want to do that, they'll pay you so little that you're in such debt you can't take care of your own family. So I almost thought of this movement as the revolt of the caring classes. So I think we are at the brink of a reformulation of what work is and what is valuable about it.
In my 10 years of this work, and in my personal experiences on this journey, there's one theme I see over and over again. We are in a youth independence crisis.
There is definitely an epidemic of overprotective parenting. We don't have very many children. We don't have 12. 6 of whom die, we have 1 or 2, and that makes them very precious. And maybe you're also extraordinarily desperate as a mother to maintain that bond with your child because you've struggled so long to achieve it. It's highly, highly valuable. You can't take a risk. And then that ethos starts to permeate the schools, and it starts to permeate the higher education institutions as those children mature. I said, look, what you have to understand is that you're a danger to your children no matter what, right? You can let them go out in the world and be hurt, or you can overprotect them and hurt them that way. So here's your choice. You can make your children competent and courageous, or you can make them safe. But you can't make them safe because life isn't safe. So if you sacrifice their courage and competence on the altar of safety, then you disarm them completely. And all they can do is pray to be protected.
Really, essentially, kids who are hyper-sheltered are kept dependent, ignorant, and isolated. And pay close attention because that is the opposite of self-determination. That is a lack of self-determination. When I got out of my parents' house, that's what started my hero's journey. And there's other people in my industry like me, even those I know personally, who started out on the client side and had an experience with a youth program that was profound. And this was part of their hero's journey. And so then it comes full circle, they come back around and they do this work professionally.
When I was 17, they locked me in a mental ward. When I got out, I didn't want to go back home, so I took off and hopped trains across the country. That was the freest I've ever felt in my whole life.
The creative ways of surviving are by banding together, watching out for each other, covering each other's back, finding places they can sleep where it's warm.
I came back here, I think I was 21. I took a bus down to the State Health Department building downtown. And I came outside from having found out that I was pregnant. It was really surreal, and I got on the bus and went to LSS.
Our drop-in was kind of full of smelly gutter punk kids most of the day. And Jen was one of those, and I had, developed a really good relationship with her. And then it was well, what do you think about this? And what do you want to do about this? And have you told, the child's father? And how do you think you're going to tell your own parents? And then I told her whatever her decision was, that I would be there for her. And, look at her now. I mean, she's an outreach worker, and she works in the agency. And, to see her come full circle and give back to the very community, that served her. That's why I come to work every morning.
The reality here is many of us start out broken. We start out in broken families and we have to escape. Or something happens that throws us out into the world, like personal crisis, natural disaster. And from there, we need to find our sense of meaning and a story that is purposeful and find truth, and we have to form our little Frankenstein tribes to create something new that we pass down to future generations. But we're not going to have that, and we're going to lose that discovery and that culture and that movement that has been developing. We're going to lose that if it is taken over by abusive, toxic ideologies that promote victimhood and lifelong dependence and trap people.
So what kind of world are we creating? It's worth asking yourself this question, and it's not a question. It's more the question is, what kind of world am I creating? What am I adding to? Am I adding to this deep, unconditional love for self and other that is so healing, or am I adding to polarization and aggression and even violence? It's really worth asking ourselves this.
Today, Governor Tim Walz ordered Minnesotans to stay at home for 2 weeks. This is the latest step to slow the spread of COVID-19 and give our hospitals a chance to prepare to treat the most at-risk patients. The executive order issued today takes effect on Friday and runs through April 10th. The governor is also extending bar and restaurant closures until May 1st.
To whom it may concern, please accept this letter as verification the person holding this letter is an emergency worker defined by Governor Walz's Executive Order 20-02, who provides essential services on behalf of Lutheran Social Service of Minnesota. It was a pretty dramatic experience. It was early pandemic, and tons of people came out to support our work. They called us heroes, they complimented us, they congratulated us, they thanked us, they donated tons of stuff.
Well, during this outbreak, a lot of you have been asking us about Minnesota's homeless population.
As Reg Chapman found, work is being done to ensure they stay safe, but there is more left to do.
Men and women who have no place to call home are wondering how they protect themselves from COVID-19.
It's a pretty big scare here right now because, like I said, a lot of these guys here, they're in and out. We don't know where these guys are going to, and then, they're coming in, they're coughing.
Although he is thankful for shelter, he is worried about being in a confined space with dozens of other homeless men.
Early pandemic, I felt like I was really starting to find my place in this work. I developed my own little crew that were my friends, or people I thought I could really trust, I could be myself.
They walk around, they ride the trains and buses, and congregate. They mingle to wherever they can meet right now.
Many run to sharing and caring hands. These pictures tell the story of people in distress who don't have the luxury of social distancing. They come here for free meals and social services, but Director Mary Jo Copeland says it's overwhelming. Many bartenders and waitresses laid off because of COVID-19 are here seeking help. With churches closing their doors, food donations and volunteers are not arriving at her doorstep. It's a crisis Mary Jo says needs all of our attention and efforts to make sure the most vulnerable have a chance at staying COVID-19 free.
I don't want their money. Fitness 19. Woo! All in one fitness. That's fitness. Gyms are closed, and we don't want people telling us we can't go to work and take care of our own businesses.
She wants to go back to work. She's got a good crew that wants to come and work out, and she can't, so they can't. So
Are you
hardcore anti-Trumper, just so you know who you're talking to.
All right, that's okay.
That's anti-Trump news media right there. You guys actually do really good work. I don't agree with your views, but I will admit that you do good work. He's hardcore anti-Trump.
When it comes to the pandemic, are you scared at all? Do you believe in it?
Yes,
yes, I believe
we
it's
sure
real.
do. Exactly, it is real.
But we still have a right, I think, to work.
And there was one woman that I became friends with where I thought we were becoming a little more personal. I asked her on a date. Well, she didn't say anything about the date for over a month. And then I got an email that was very long and kind of stressed out and was very confusing. Well, she requested a conflict mediation with our boss present, our boss Kelly. So we did the mediation. She was again vague. She didn't mention the date at all. She did say one thing though, and that she was uncomfortable around white men. My boss corroborated this by saying, we live in a white supremacist, cis heteronormative, capitalist patriarchy and blah blah blah.
Yes, as I say, this is a particularly shocking and horrible case because of the calm and deliberate manner in which this officer just kept his knee on the neck of the victim for so long. We see a lot of cases, and unfortunately, it's the other cases and the lack of any discipline, the lack of any accountability, the continuing problems with the culture that have led to a case so dramatic as this. And so this may be an exception, but we need to change the culture and the accountability on a daily basis to make some real change in the police force.
The early days of George Floyd were like nothing I've ever experienced in my life before or since. There was this magic, mysterious energy in the air, like this electricity. It's like people were kids again. There was this openness, People were active, they were getting out, they were passionate. It wasn't just protests, people were also having block parties and they were doing spontaneous speeches and art.
I'm looking at no black-on-black violence in the black central neighborhood 8+ days without no police. So there's no regular patrols or police riding around doing how they normally doing, and we don't got high spike levels of violence. We don't have high spike levels of home theft or any of that kind of stuff in the community, and it's been good.
Kids, quick, let me know. You have to go quick.
So bottom line, justice for Floyd, and I hope they stop looting at some point. If there were more of us, we could go stop them from looting, but it's just us four.
The family-owned business has come under fire after a phone call to police about the passing of a counterfeit $20 bill led to 46-year-old George Floyd begging a Minneapolis police officer for his life.
I was not there.
You were not there.
The staff that called the police followed protocol. When he identified the bill was fake, the patron was out of the establishment. When the police arrived, he was outside of the establishment, which normally never takes place. Why he was still there, we're not sure.
Owner Micah Bumniali says what happened on the street outside his establishment should never have ended with a man dying.
That's right. Everybody say they coming out here in their Sunday best. It's summertime. We like 90 days in COVID. You know what I'm saying? It looked like everything you can think of. A beautician, a barbershop, a barbecue. I mean, fixing bikes. You know what I'm saying? Giving out canned goods and necessities, because, you know, in those stores in the community, I mean, all those services, you know what I'm saying? I mean, you literally got people that just went shopping out here for free.
Using hotels for emergency housing is an obvious answer. They are largely vacant as we enter an economic depression in the midst of a global pandemic.
Hey, my name is Rosemary. I'm an outreach worker, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with the kind of stuff that we do, but I'm not going to try to get you to do anything you don't want to do, you know, but just see if there's anything that you need help with.
Right now we are at the home of 200 people who had been displaced or unsheltered. This used to be a hotel, now it's a sanctuary. The next day we invited some more people to come, and people are still coming.
Aaron and Rich Hooks Wayman, together for 17 years. They met in Minnesota, married, and now have 6 kids, 4 boys and 2 girls.
StreetWorks is a collaborative of agencies, and we work with youth that are ages 12 to 21, and we work with kids that are at risk of being homeless. We work with kids that are homeless because they've been abused or neglected in their homes.
They've lived in Maine for 2 years, but for several years they lived in Minneapolis, just 2 blocks from that convenience store where George Floyd was killed.
That could have been me. Like, that's the biggest thing. It could have been me. It could have been my daughters. If we lived there, it could have been our kids.
We used to have foster daughters, and I used to routinely send them up to that corner store
all the time
to get groceries and to get sandwiches.
You know, I almost think of it as a COVID protest too, given the timing of this, that people were breaking free of something. And then it evolved and it changed throughout the rest of the summer, and social justice took over, and it became very aggressive and very domineering.
30 years ago, it was the dream of some Middle Eastern immigrants to the Twin Cities.
A tiny grocery store in Delhi in northeast Minneapolis selling a strange type of bread and this weird thing called hummus.
The Wadi family and Holy Land hung Black Lives Matter signs in their windows. They donated food to the protesters. Majdi says that his family felt united with their city, united in sadness and united in a desire for justice. And then came the tweets.
A tweet went viral for my daughter that she did in 2012 when she was a teenager. I said, you know what, we're firing her. She's no longer here. Hopefully this will calm the anger down, but still, it did not.
So, that is why we are here. We are not here in celebration. We are here to put the word out there. Brian Ingram, we are sick and tired of people like you going out there and appropriating our culture and our food.
Majdi says protesters started coming to their stores.
Once you get exposed for being racist, ain't no turning back from that. Ain't no coming back. Definitely not.
And from there, things just got worse.
And then on July 2nd, a woman in the network showed up who I'd only met twice. And she proceeded to yell at me in this giant tirade. And there was a whole bunch of things going on. But one of those things is that she accused me of predatory behavior towards this coworker. So then I found out that a whole bunch of rumors and insults had been thrown around about me, and this was snowballing out of control. That led to a meeting with my manager, Kelly, and Jim, that's one of the leading managers in StreetWorks.
The nice thing about privilege is it basically runs on automatic pilot.
Yeah.
Not doing anything keeps it going.
Yeah, and if we don't recognize what role we play, not only do we keep it going, but we become the oppressor.
We can inadvertently contribute to the problem. One of the pitfalls to doing this work is we often get caught up in the crisis that's in front of us.
I asked for this meeting between the three of us.
And especially when she then said that part with predatory behavior, I take that very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't specific, but it's I take that as a false accusation. So if it's false and people treat it as just automatically true based on what one person said, I think that would be really dangerous, particularly for me.
Just to be very clear, we're not doing an investigation around that right now. And if had filed an actual, allegation with me or with anybody at StreetWorks, then we would. All right. Mm-hmm. And since we're not doing that, that indicates that hasn't happened. The rumor mill is probably never going to stop turning. One of the most effective ways to counter that rumor mill is with the relationships with the people we have, like trusting relationships, where they hear something, they can sit there and go, yeah, I've worked with Jack, that doesn't seem to quite fit.
So, as you know, since our mediation, I've had follow-up conversations with both of you about like how things are going, and it's just as you've reported, I've heard the same from her of things are good. It feels good. That was, as you said, the conflict was resolved.
Having talked about the predatory behavior thing, I'm not dropping that. That's still going to be on my mind when I talk to and when I talk to. I will say that one of the things that she has shared with multiple people, the term "triggered" comes up a number of times. I would say that part of that emotional response that she has shared is she's also talked about being a person with lived experience.
So I'll let you see for yourself how my manager rated me in the midst while all of this was happening. Let's see, we got some SMART goals. So these are the goals I established when I first started working here. Establish effective relationships and routines with other outreach workers. Annual rating is high quality. Outcomes successful. Meaningful and effective outreach partner relationships established. Next one, work with community partners to establish creative approaches to working with youth. Kelly gave me again high quality and says successful. Jack has done this many times, such as helping the Teen Tech Center to realize their space can not only support youth creativity, but also safety for youth to have an indoor space off the streets. Foster proactive, community-oriented relationships. Annual rating is superior, which I think is an even better rating than high quality. Actual outcomes. Meaningful relationships established with Zamia and Intertwine. Youth benefited through these by participating in open mic events and new community connections. Decision making, high quality. So here's what Kelly says. Jack pays attention to patterns and connections in order to make logical and timely professional decisions. Innovation. Jack is open to feedback and looking for other ways to improve. Embraces change to different ways to deliver services. Integrity. Jack holds himself to high standards of ethical behavior. Supervisor comments. Jack does a wonderful job making connections, working with youth, identifying resources, and doing the work of outreach. We are so thankful to have him on the team. After my one-year review, a couple of days later, on July 31st, I received an email from Kelly where she explained there was another meeting, or multiple meetings, where people claimed I had shown anti-Black bias in my work with my outreach partner, who was being accused alongside me. Hey, Kelly.
Hey, Jack. Thanks for your patience. That multiple of her outreach workers had said that they felt that they saw or heard or somehow that there was that you and had practiced some anti-Black bias when you were out on shifts. Anti-Black bias is something that we are all ingrained with through society, through our entire lives, and our job, regardless of, even where you are, if you're in this society. I also want to say that, for me, it's less important whether it has happened or it hasn't happened, and it's more important to create good opportunity to talk about implicit bias. As a supervisor, is one of my goals for going forward is to really put together implicit bias training that is not only at orientation, but then also has ongoing check-in steps. Do you kind of have any thoughts or feels that come up so far that you want to share?
I'm just really angry. I have to be very honest right now, because this has gone way too far for me. And I have some real strong moral differences from a lot of people around me, and I don't necessarily share that openly. And people can believe whatever they want to believe, and I try to make my peace with people's differences. But when people try to make me a scapegoat, and I've been through, 3 rounds now, this is the 3rd time now where something is coming up in this overall situation, it's not worth it to me to just go along with this stuff, because it's so disrespectful to my boundaries as a human being. And it really makes me feel completely disempowered and powerless that I've dedicated so much to trying to do good things and trying to invest in relationships. And this is very true in this job, and it's true well beyond it. And no matter what I do, it's never good enough. And it doesn't really give me any trust in the people around me.
Yeah, that sounds like just a hard place to be in. This work is hard. It's hard with challenges come up with youth, challenges come up with coworkers, challenges come up with society as a whole, all of that. And one of the reasons why I suggested that just taking a break and let's come back to this is because I need you to be willing to work on this.
I didn't necessarily have a lot of trust on this type of topic to begin with, and whatever trust I did have has essentially been broken. And so I don't really have any faith that conversations and training is going to be coming from an honest place.
As I said earlier, for me, it's not so much whether you feel like it has happened or it hasn't, but it's something that if there is a perception that has been happening, then it's something that needs to be addressed and worked on. It's ongoing work that we need to do in the society, especially as white folks.
it just doesn't seem like people are being very honest. It seems like they're making statements based on a belief system, and they're following that, and they're not necessarily trying to find what is true. But with implicit bias, it's essentially saying that I'm subconsciously racist, and that's not really provable. It sounds like I'm being essentially treated as guilty no matter what. And there's this and when you said this is not an end game goal, then there's nothing I can do. I'm always going to be repenting for my sins.
The difference with implicit bias is that it is something that you do not need to have evidence that you are guilty of it or not, because we all have implicit bias. We all have subconscious racism in ourselves growing up in this society. And because of the vast nature of the racial inequalities that exist in our society, but especially in youth experiencing homelessness, and especially in Minneapolis and in Minnesota compared to other places around the country, it is so important that we take this on. As I just heard you saying, that it makes you question, like, do you want to continue working in this environment? Well, that is a question that I do ask you to consider closely with yourself. I do want to say that, I really appreciate so much of what you bring to outreach and to this work. And I think that your passion and your intellectual examination of this work is really astounding.
I had another meeting with Kelly on August 13th. I requested conflict mediation with the people who were falsely accusing me. Some of these people weren't named, and the number of these people wasn't even specified. My friends were being threatened or pressured into silence. They had been treated as guilty by association to some degree, and they now were not talking to me. It's said when you don't succeed, it's something you've missed. And sometimes that's true. But sometimes you've tried every door, every window, seen every blank face, and they all turn away. Sometimes it just falls apart before it ever started. Sometimes the world isn't ready. When the world isn't ready, let them hear your tragedy. Speak it, sing it, scream it, breathe it like they owe you an ear to listen. Your tragedy is their tragedy. The best revenge is to thrive against all odds, to be really alive here and now, and be the confrontation with reality others resist. The best revenge is a gift. The gift of anger over apathy, dedication over depression, bluntness over bitterness. To value the quality of your character over success. When you realize you have nothing left to lose, you're free. Nobody can touch you. You are the one who chooses. The best revenge is to choose life while others choose non-existence. I am the one who learns. I am the one who watches. I am the one who breathes. I'm still here.
I need to let you know that my request for you to engage in implicit bias training is not optional. I am making it a requirement for your continued employment at LSS. If you want to get back to me by Wednesday, midday.
What about requesting each person to come to mediation?
need to let you know that one, I don't know who these people are, as far as hearing from multiple sources. That's been passed on to me. Two, if you do not agree to going to implicit bias training, you can request mediations with folks, but you will no longer be an employee of LSS.
Can you tell me the reason why I'm being required to do this training and nobody else is?
Because it has become to my attention that this is something that folks have said you need to work on. I think as a white person doing this work with a lot of folks of color, it is really important for me to be as aware of my biases as possible. And so, though I don't think I'm using bias in my decisions, let's do training. That would be the response that I was looking for. Yeah, so have you given this issue some thought? Come to a decision?
I stand by my original position, so I understand that you're probably not going to change your position, and I fully accept that.
Okay, I understand that. Okay, well then, as of now, you will no longer be an employee with LSS. So I will need you to return your phone, your computer, your keys, and your StreetWorks outreach bag by 5 o'clock tomorrow.
The following letter I'm about to read is my final public statement summarizing what happened to me in a fully fledged cult of social justice in Minneapolis, St. Paul. I emailed the following letter to 329 contacts in my network, and that includes executive directors of some of the big youth agencies across the state, and that also includes staff that knew me back when I lived in youth transitional housing. This was a long time coming, and if I didn't do it, I don't know who else would. A handful of people mocked me over it, and they would share comments like ha ha ha, white male tears, or you look like a mass shooter, things like that. Some people chastised me because they wanted me to call out institutional white supremacy, that BIPOC face, instead of talking about my own experiences. And that was about it. The people that were doing this stuff and throwing these accusations at me were never held accountable. They weren't really asked to do anything. Everyone went dead silent after this, and I have no idea what happened. I also left a copy of a book with my stuff that I returned to Kelly. I didn't tell her about this, but I left a copy of When Things Fall Apart by Pema Chodron hidden in the stuff for her to find. About 6 weeks after I was fired, she emailed me, and she thanked me for the book, and she said that it really touched her, and it felt like it was honest and genuine. So I responded, and I shared that I was glad it really affected her, and that's the last I ever heard from her. So where I'm left today is kind of in no man's land, where I was really displaced and isolated and left in chaos. What I've really come back to is the hero's journey. That maybe that whole saga for that 10 years was a hero's journey, and now it's over, and I'm finding a new path, a new hero's journey, a new place. And that's what's really meaningful to me in this. But what happens if the hero returns and the village isn't there? What happens if the village has been corrupted? A profound tragedy has happened, and it has been destroyed. It is a shell of its former self. What does the hero become without the village? So this is my ode to a decade of independence. While I've experienced and witnessed a lot of suffering and a lot of sabotage and pettiness and tragedy on this path, I don't think I would trade this life or this path for any other. Because all of those experiences have made me realize just how profound it is that I got a glimpse of that magic and that liberation at all. So this isn't just for me. This is a call to you to accept the call to adventure and your hero's journey, even if you don't know what it is yet. That's how it goes. You take one step forward blindly, and you discover it and uncover it as you go. Listen for those things that call your attention and tell you, pay attention, this matters, this is real, it is important. Even if you don't know it's the thing you should be doing, maybe it's a thing that actually matters. And if you dedicate to it, you will find your values and your priorities and begin to discover the path. That is my call to you and to myself. Stella Pope Duarte once told me this: the universe calls you to your path. But the universe respects you. And so you have the choice. Sometimes bridges are burned, match lighting up the sky. No lesson was learned. So you're starting over again, resetting your life. We haven't got much time now to figure all this out. Ooh, I under. You break out of your shell, explore all the world's entropy. Running in the field in circles again. In the nighttime, with the moon as your lifeline. So water calls your name, brings you down to your knees, lying in deep dark dirt. Flat ground and flat sky. Is there a reason why you're here? Where the wise man dies, the young man tries to live out his dreams. It's all just a game now. It's all just a game now. It's all just a game now. So why fight when you can play? Why give in when you can seize the day? Why fight when you can play? Why run when you can learn to stay?
Stay right here. It's gonna be okay. 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 It's gonna be okay.